evening. Thank you for staying with us on The Big Story this evening. We're taking a look at the EACC that now has a new boss, Twalib Mbarak. Remember, during that parliamentary committee, he said he was ready to confront graft cartels. He vowed that he will restore the confidence of EACC's mandate of fighting corruption. So Sophia Anuna got the chance to speak to outgoing CEO Halakhe Waqo as well on his experiences, experience at the EACC, and probably what he sees as the entry point for the new boss. Let's listen in.
So earlier on today, Twalib Mbarak was sworn in as the CEO, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. He takes over from Halakhe Waqo, who has been CEO for the last 6 years. In fact, he was the first holder of that office. And he joins me now to reflect a little bit more about his tenure. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us here on The Big Story. Let's begin with, on a scale of 1 to 10, how you'd rate the last 6 years in the EACC, 1 being horribly poor and 10 being excellent, and why you give it that ranking?
When I look back, pick from 2013 to date, I will give it at least 7 out of 10. And I'll give it the 7 out of 10 for 2 reasons. 1 reason for internal reasons and the achievements that have been registered at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission within that time frame, in comparison with the previous years, has been significant and quite a lot. And when you look at the number of cases that have been taken there or brought to us and investigated, and the number of cases that we have in court, over 600 criminal cases and over 400 assets recovery suits in court across the country, you really see a significant leap from what it was. The number of cases concluded in court, also a big leap, because in 2013, we had only 1 case concluded in court. Only 1. And in 2014, only 2. But by 2016, the numbers have gone up to 25 conclusions of cases. 2017, 33 cases were concluded in court. And by November 2018, in my last months, we've registered over 50 cases concluded in court, and out of which about 40 were convictions. That is quite encouraging. Our conviction rates in court have also really jumped up, because our percentage is at, out of the 50 that I mentioned, about out of 49 concluded, 39 were convictions, and a few more of administrative action.
Some of the files you've taken to the DPP have been returned because of issues around evidence. But let me put to you, because you said the public participation and involvement has not been encouraging. The East African Index found that 75% of graft is the government officials that actually go out seeking bribes, so that the biggest problem is corruption in government. That 2/3 of the problem is not ordinary everyday bribery and issues of corruption, it's in government, and we're not seeing convictions there.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to go back and insist and correct one impression, that even your statement, that files go to DPP and they are returned back. I want to tell you one thing. Our concurrence rate with the DPP is at 99% when it comes to evidence. Number 2, it was only a year and a half ago that Kenya, and EACC for that matter, was praised and celebrated by the Commonwealth countries for being the best in gathering, storing and presenting evidence in court.
Why doesn't it hold in court then?
It has held. That is why we are getting over 80% convictions. It's only that you people do not want to acknowledge the good work. And I want to repeat that. It holds. And when it comes to the
NYS1, there was no conviction.
We are in court still.
But
and we don't agree.
People were released.
We do not agree. It's not us releasing, it's the courts.
The courts argue they do that because of failure of enough evidence. So there's been that back and forth. The courts argue we can only deal with matters as they're presented.
I completely disagree. Okay. And I disagree alongside my other colleagues in the enforcement sector, and particularly the investigators, I disagree with that position, and in that case, I know how much we invested our time and how much the volumes of evidence that we presented. Some of the issues raised are technicalities, not the raw evidence or the tangible evidence. So, but even that, we don't agree. We are back in court with them, and many more cases that we have presented, I've always been going through. Remember, it was just recently that the cemetery case that has been there for long was concluded with convictions. And it's also this time that we are seeing the Anglo-leasing cases in court are towards conclusion. And we've even brought in international experts and witnesses to testify. And we have been fashioning out the recovery issues. And that is why you saw that we got money on the account of the chicken gate investigations and bought ambulances for various health centers in our country. We are expecting to get over 500 million shillings back of the Jersey money. And even last month, the Jersey minister was here to confirm the same. Yeah. So if our evidence could work in foreign jurisdiction to retrieve all this, we even have some of the Anglo-leasing monies frozen in Swiss accounts. We have assets we have traced to UK and other places. So we only need our people, Kenyans, to understand the level of engagement and how much, and move from the pessimist position into being part of the process.
Because we keep seeing corruption cases being reported. So let's test that 80% conviction rate. You talked about 17 convictions and 600 cases. How is reconcile that for me? How is that 80%?
No, it's not 17 convictions. I told you out of the 49 cases that we registered by November, there were 39 convictions and about 6 administrative actions and discharges. There were only 3 to 4 acquittals. And even in the cases of the acquittals, we've appealed for further adjudication by the court. Fair enough.
39. In one NYS case, for instance, we've seen 43 suspects taken to court, and then we see most of them let go. So that let me then go back to the question of, at the end of the day, the big fish, because Kenyans keep asking, it's how we describe it now. The smaller people, the justice and the service of the same is very expeditious. But when it comes to the senior officials, now we see them a few paraded in court, but still. Is impunity a problem in your view in our criminal justice system?
Impunity is definitely a problem. That's why we're fighting it. But you cannot say that the big people are not handled. From the years I've been at the Commission, I can assure you, in 2013, I remember the PS for Foreign Affairs. I remember a few more managing directors of that time. In 2015, a few more people. By 2015, you remember the many ministers, the many PSs and others whose cases are mostly in court, including that NYS case that you are mentioning. And, you know, when you look at who the big person is, our view of being big also may be different. One, yes, the holder of an office, and the office one individual holds and its status in the society is definitely an issue. But how about the volume of what they transact? And that is why even a small traffic policeman, like the one we've been running after for asset recovery, after we froze the money in his accounts to the tune of 39 million shillings, a police constable, is for us not a small man, because the trade there is very big. Whether he is part of a network that is feeding or not, we know that that is the first stop for us. There are people, some of the people who are convicted recently, like the former PS for local government and others. You can see very clearly that we are doing that. In our own case, some of the cases in court are former ministers and CSs and PSs, former governors and current governors, members of parliament, whether at Senate or National Assembly level, and managing directors of state corporations. So who is this big other person you're looking for beyond these people?
We still haven't seen convictions, and so let me ask you this around those big people, because the president in a summit at State House around anti-corruption called you out specifically on the, what we call the infamous list of 175.
Which to me is not infamous, but very famous and potent.
All right, and some of his CSs were suspended, of course, never got their jobs back off of what you said. These are the people that should be looked into. And he called you out and said, I did what you told me to do. Some of the people in the commission disagreed with that list, saying that it had been altered, so there have been a lot of politics. Do you now, in hindsight, regret having submitted that list to the president?
One, I don't regret. Number two, it wasn't correct. That in the hindsight, when I look back, that there are some people who disagreed that the list was changed. There's nothing changed. I participated in preparation of the list from the word go to the end. Nothing changed. It's still the same standing. Probably the levels of investigations were different. Some were at the point of conclusion, others were in the middle. And if you are a country that is looking at matters of governance and fighting ethics, ethical matters, the threshold globally or world over is much higher than what we are struggling with here in Kenya. And in other countries, you know that if somebody, it was only a year ago that a minister in UK was late in appearing at the House of Lords and resigns because he was late for 5 minutes. Here is where a minister appears, a state corporation director, who is mentioned in involving in a 6 billion scandal, 6 billion Kenya shillings scandal, or hundreds of millions of dollars, fights to stay around and still talk other languages. That's the only problem we have. We have nothing that we hide. All those records are there, speaking for themselves.
But if they're speaking for themselves, these people have been presented in court, but no one has been convicted.
Let me go there. The court, I do not control courts. They do not control court even as I leave them. Even the DPP does not control the courts. The courts is another set of, or another level of the justice system. We have expressed our own issues and frustrations. We have mentioned our issues, including this morning at the swearing in of my colleague who is taking over from me. And very clearly, that we stand together as the investigative and prosecutorial agencies, that we always do our work, and either the courts take too long to conclude. It was only this morning that the AG was talking about a case he started before he was appointed to judiciary 16 years ago, a case that started 26 years ago. We have no control. But our issue is to make sure that our evidence is always on the table and push all through, and the DPP or the prosecutor always firmly standing up and prosecuting cases.
So let me ask you this. To those who are feeling in this renewed, if you like, campaign against corruption, that EACC appears to have been sidelined, and that is the case because they have seen to have failed in the past, that DPP, DCI are taking center stage in dealing with the matters. They are pretty much taking all, if you like, the limelight in as far as this is concerned. Are you concerned with that sidelining, quote unquote?
One, I do not agree with sidelining. One, we do not wait for anybody's instruction to put us in the middle of anything to do the work. EACC is an independent commission, constitutional, running its affairs independently, only reporting to Parliament and the President where due and as provided for in law. But you can see that we may not have announced many of the things happening at the EACC. From that populist perspective, maybe we've been working hard and keeping the work tempo high.
So DPP is being populist?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm only telling you that we have not given ourselves the announcements that you may have expected of us on a daily basis. We forward files to DPP. It was only 2 weeks ago that even in December, we forwarded 38 files to DPP. I know in the next 1 week, maybe similar or more numbers are going to the DPP. Okay. And we are not swayed, and we are not pulled from our track by the naysayers, by the detractive forces, by the negative comments. But I know the EACC will continue, and it will continue striving to progress.
Are you aware that there was a proposal to strip the EACC of investigative powers? There's a miscellaneous bill around that.
And I know that it is being driven by the people who are already charged in court, the people whose cases are very mature and ripe at the EACC, and they know that they are on the line for them to appear in court and maybe even getting conviction. So that is it. But on our side, The Constitution stands for itself, Article 79. Parliament knows very clearly. The other important institutions that function alongside the EACC clearly understand. So let it be, let's see when the time comes. But I know very well that that is a futile effort, because it is an effort which is a defeatist being made very clearly by the people who themselves are very unclean.
Great. Sophia Wanuna there speaking to outgoing CEO, EACC CEO Halakhe Waqo. And he says the conviction rates have gone up. They have 80% conviction. And it's not them releasing suspects, it's the courts. And at the beginning of this show, we had David Maraga, that is the CJ, saying if you bring cases that are not well investigated, we'll throw them out. So it's basically a back and forth of some sort. So we're about to end this show, but I'd like to get the final comments from Samuel Kimeu, Executive Director, Transparency International. Samuel, your last thoughts on this, plus what is the starting point for the new boss at the EACC from where you sit?
Thank you, Linda. Allow me first to respond to a statement that Mheshimiwa Serem ended with, which I think is factually wrong. And I think in this country, our politicians have succeeded to confuse us that when you are being cleared for public office, your guilt or innocence is being determined, which I think is nothing can be far from the truth. We have two standards. There's a criminal standard which seeks to punish, and the purpose of that standard is to determine guilt or innocence with the sole purpose of apportioning blame and punishment. There's a leadership standard which is premised on the position that leadership is a trust, and you only trust the best in society. You trust the best in society, and as such, you cannot just allow anybody and everybody to have a claim to leadership. I think those two standards are very different, and our politicians since 2013 have consistently confused those two standards and convoluted them so that today, when someone is being asked questions, we say they are being persecuted. I think nothing can be far from the truth, and we have to change that. So if we are going to create an environment for the fight against corruption to succeed, we must admit that in civilized societies, there is contact that is unbecoming of leaders that basically precludes them from being cleared to vie for office. And if they hold office, they are required by ethical standards to step aside or resign from their positions so that those who can be trusted better take up that position. I think I needed to respond to that so that Mheshimiwa Serem doesn't quite get away with that. 30
seconds, Kimeo. I need to wrap this up. Where does the new boss begin from?
Well, I think the new boss needs to do a prioritization of his cases. There are so many cases in this country that are reported to the EACC, and evidently the EACC cannot deal with all of them. So it would be important that the prioritization of those cases in terms of the amounts involved, in terms of the profile of the people involved, is important for purposes of instilling confidence in Kenyans that the EACC is doing its work. The EACC only plays an investigative role. Okay. The prosecutions, which we use to gauge their success, is actually a product of an assembly that constitutes EACC, the DPP, and the judiciary.
Okay.
It will be important for us to begin to look at individual cases and ask ourselves, where did the chain break?
Okay, that's a good place to end this. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Samuel Kimeu, Executive Director, Transparency International. Earlier on, we had Aldai, Member of Parliament, Cornelius Serem, who spoke to us on phone. And of course, a big thank you to our guest, Halakhe Waqo, outgoing CEO, who spoke to Sophia Wanuna, and of course, Sophia Wanuna, who's a lead reporter on The Big Story. So that's where we wrap it.